And welcome into the week 3 edition of the Consistently Cashin podcast here at Big Guy Fantasy Sports at bigguyfantasysports.com. I'm Colby Conway at Colby R. Conway over on X. And with me, as always, here, Ron Rigney. So, Ron, how are we doing, my friend?
Doing good, man. It's been a big college football Saturday. I'm looking forward to after we give the people our cashing lineup this week. Looking forward to watching a little Notre Dame Fighting Irish against the Ohio State Buckeyes. It's been a rough day for Coach Prime, though. I don't know if you saw that, Mr. Conway, but man, Coach Prime not looking too prime there in Oregon Duck Country.
Yeah, not a good spot for him today. He needs some boys up front on both sides of the ball. That's what he
Yeah,
needs.
yeah,
He knows it. He knows it.
yeah.
Of course, after cashing in week 1, week 2 was a little bit of a different story for us here, unfortunately, Ron. However, we still put up a very respectable 116 points with our lineup. So let's go ahead and bring that up here from week 2. Let me remove the banner at the bottom so you can see everything there. The stack with Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown, solid. James Cook was very good for us. We went with the value with Josh Kelly. The matchup proved to be a little bit too much for him there. Oops, let me try this. There we go. Now we can see it with our expressions. Not much to be had there. Ayuk, the shoulder injury that popped up didn't necessarily help. He continued to play, but he wasn't as effective. DJ Moore against a familiar foe was solid. Musgrave let me down on multiple fronts. And then with that last receiver that we had there, we went with DK Metcalf. I think we had enough money. We could have got to Keenan Allen. That probably hindsight's 2020. So of course, we could have built a perfect lineup if we went back knowing how everything was going to play out, but that's just not how it is. And then the Jets defense was
Bad.
Oh, hold on. I lost the lineup here. There we go. And the Jets just gave us 0. Dallas was just too much. Zach Wilson didn't necessarily help anything there. So it's one of those things. 116 points in the lineup is pretty good. Not necessarily making an excuse for kind of what happened, but if we can put up a number, if that's our floor, that's going to be pretty good moving forward here. So ultimately, looking back at the lineup, I think the only change I would have made, and it's one of those things too, where like, yeah, Keenan Allen probably was good, but in a game with 68 total points for DK to only come away with 13.5, I think that was kind of the calling card here of this lineup, as well as Musgrave struggles after a couple good sequences for him in the beginning, a couple catches, and then just went quiet.
Well, and our guy, the pioneer of consistency, as you call him, Bob Lung, that's the reason he does not like those rookies. Doesn't matter the position they play. He's going to tell you they are not consistent, and that's definitely what we got with Luke Musgrave. But a couple of those plays worked out well. James Cook looked solid. Looked like they were committed to running the ball with him. My guy DJ Moore showed out a little bit last week as well, even though he's trapped in purgatory on that Bears team. So a couple of them worked out, but I feel pretty good about of course, we say this every week, but I really mean it this time. I really feel good about the guys I got, and usually you and I are on the same page. So I'm thinking that a lot of these lineups that we have, these guys that we have, are going to be the same, and I think they're going to win some cash this week.
I would say more often than not, a lot of times when you and I build lineups, we get into it only comes down to kind of debating between a couple. You and I agree on a few, or we're like, yeah, it's fine. We'll put him in there. Hey, I'll give you one of yours if you give me one of mine type thing. And then it's just the last couple that we have to kind of to navigate those waters through per se. So let me go ahead. Let's bring up this week's lineup here. Let's put us on the side. So we're in DraftKings here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the slate here. So as we look at it, quarterback, a lot of big names in the higher priced options, but really when we look at these games, that Minnesota Chargers game sticks out. I think the over-under is actually in the low to mid 50s. I like to say it feels like 75 because that's the way everybody's talking about it. So of this upper tier of quarterbacks, and I'll even go down to the Kirk Cousins just because it is a game that's very appealing. What do you think in terms of paying up here in terms of like Herbert at 75, maybe Mahomes at 83, or is Kirk Cousins at 6,900 the lock and load this week?
When I put my lineup in there, I wanted to build around one of two guys. I wanted to build around Justin Jefferson, or I wanted to build around Travis Kelce. It was just whichever one worked out. And the one that I put together, I put Kirk Cousins in at $6,900. I don't think with the total that has, like you said, I've seen some places where that total is 54 points. I don't know if you've watched either one of these defenses, but these are two of the worst defenses I think I've seen in a long time. That Chargers defense cannot stop anybody. And I feel like Kirk Cousins got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison on the other side, TJ Hawkinson. He's got weapons out of the backfield. and he's looked solid too. He's looked like one of the better quarterbacks in the league. I just think it's $6,900 with that total, and that I think that's going to be a track meet. I just don't think you can say no to that.
I would tend to agree with that. There's just too much going on in this game. I'm trying to see if I'm looking here on DraftKings Sportsbook if they do the league leader in terms of passing yards at a particular position, and I'm not exactly finding it here. But just to kind of put things into perspective here for Kirk Cousins, when I go to passing yards, I'm looking here for the lines because obviously we're at the point now. I'm humble enough to admit Vegas probably knows more than I do in terms of stuff like this. But when you look and you get down, like there's Jared Goff at 267 yards. You come to this game, it's Herbert at 283.5, and they had the line at Cousins at 292.5 passing yards, far and away. Even Mahomes is only at 286. So Vegas is saying that the highest line is set for Kirk Cousins. We get him at 6,900 here. Minnesota can't run the ball. There's going to be a ton of points scored in this game because Minnesota can't stop anybody. I like Kirk Cousins a lot here at 6,900. And then if we go down just to kind of appease people, if they're building lineups from there, Jared Goff is at home, and that's when I consider him. So I think you could look to Jared Goff at 6,500. What do you think about Deshaun Watson at 6,100? Because as much as we want to kind of crap on the Minnesota defense and the Chargers defense, through the air, Tennessee's not any better.
No, and I do like that, and I'll give you a little giveaway, a precursor to what we're going to do later on at wide receiver. I like Amari Cooper at wide receiver. I looked at him and Elijah Moore, and I love that Amari Cooper price this week. So yeah, I'm definitely on that. I think they can throw for some yards. And when you go back up to the top there too, I like that Jared Goff pick as well. And it seems like there's a couple of guys that I'd be okay with depending on the price point. Of course, Mahomes, but he's $8,300. I'd love to go with Lamar Jackson this week, but that weather I think is going to be just outright nasty there. And you're not going to see much in the passing game. You might see him run a little bit, but I think for $7,700 doesn't make sense to pay that. So, I mean, if we needed to pay down there, of course, there's Dak Prescott there too against Arizona. That's a pretty favorable matchup too. So there's quite a few of these quarterback matchups I like. I just feel like Kirk Cousins is the way for us to go though. But if you're going to pay down, I think I'd go with I'd probably go with Dak if I was going to pay down just a little bit and save a couple $100.
Yep, I think that's a fair way to approach it here. So let's go ahead. We won't put Cousins in for now, but we'll definitely be looking at him. I think quarterback, it's going to be we're looking at like Kirk, Deshaun, maybe Jared Goff in there, or if we can get money up, maybe we go Herbert. Who knows? Over here at running back, there's a lot of red here on the screen, which is not great for the position of need here. I love Tony Pollard. I just can't justify him being the top price guy. I think we can do. Maybe not necessarily better, but in terms of value, point per dollar, I think we're in a better spot. I think for me, the first one that catches my eye, as much as it pains me, is Travis Etienne Jr. against Houston. As much pub as there's been about D'Amico back in town and everything, one thing is proven, same expletive, different year, Houston still can't stop the run. So I think we got to look at Etienne at 6,900.
Agreed. That's the first one that popped off the page at me. I went down a little bit further, and I know he's got a red number next to his name, but Jahmyr Gibbs, you talked about Goff before going against Atlanta. That Atlanta defense is much improved, but with David Montgomery out, with the wide receivers being question marks, Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Reynolds both questionable, I feel like Jahmyr Gibbs is going to play a big role in that offense, and I feel like his usage at $6,600, the amount of touches he's going to get, I think, based on injury and based on those guys on the outside, I think it's going to pay off for that $6,600. And then right below him, don't mind James Cook, again at $6,400 as well.
Interestingly enough, we talk about it here. Do you know what team on the main slate has allowed the most fantasy points to running back per game so far this season? Do you happen to know off the top of your head? Not completely fine.
I don't, but I'm going to venture a guess and say Carolina.
It is Carolina. So in fact, if you're a Josh Jacobs owner, maybe a Najee Harris or a Jalen Warren, the two teams that have allowed the most fantasy points to running back per game this year are the Pittsburgh Steelers, who take on the Las Vegas Raiders. And then second is the Las Vegas Raiders defense, who takes on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those are the first two. And then third overall is Carolina, allowing 4 rushing scores and 1 receiving score to running backs this year. And right here, we got Kenneth Walker. I don't know about you, Ron, but Zach Charbonnet has not played the role that I think many were expecting to in the beginning of the year. So what do you think about a $6,200 Kenneth Walker, double digit in terms of opportunities, 19 here with 17 carries and 2 targets last week, and then 17 opportunities in week 1 against the Rams? What do you think about Kenneth Walker at $6,200 against Carolina?
And I feel like even if Zach Charbonnet comes in and tries to play that role, I feel like they want to get the ball to Kenneth Walker. They want to get it to him last year. They want to get it to him this year again. And he's got that green 30th an opposition rank right next to his name. But I like that too. And I like that saves us, about it's about $700 cheaper than Travis Etienne, saves us about $400 underneath Jahmyr Gibbs. So yeah, I can definitely live with that because I think the touches are going to be there.
And then if you go down a little bit more, I don't hate Miles Sanders. I think you can make a really interesting case for Zach Moss because if it's going to be as rainy and windy as it is, it could just be a game where he gets 23 carries and you're basically just hope for 60 yards and a touchdown, it seems like. But it's one of those things if you can avoid the weather. If not, we got burned by him last week, but I think I'm going back to the well with Joshua Kelly this week. Minnesota can't stop a nosebleed. I think this is a much better week for him. And it's kind of, I think it's a valuable lesson. We chased the value last week with Josh Kelly and kind of overlooked the matchup. So that's why this week I don't think Jerome Ford is the play, even though it's 4,800. Tennessee can stop the run. That's the only thing that they can do, Ron. The only thing on defense that they can do. So I think it's going to be very easy to look to Jerome Ford, but I don't think that's what I'm going to be doing at 4,800. I think I would rather pay a little bit more up and go for Josh Kelly in a far more forgiving matchup because we have that have you seen Ted Lasso on Apple TV?
I have not. I'm one of the probably 5 people on the planet that is not.
Okay. So when I say be a goldfish, it may not mean a lot to you, but it's short memory. So this is a far better matchup. I'd be willing to go back to Josh Kelly at 5,400. Are there any other running backs below Josh Kelly at 5,400 that are anywhere intriguing? Laramie Tunsil's been ruled out, so we can't go Damian Pierce. Do you go Gus Edwards for the same reasons that you go Zach Moss and that it's going to be a crappy weather game? It's just going to be run, and Justice Hill is out? Or if we have so many other options, do we even need to go there?
I don't think we do because I was going to kind of make the argument, like you said, about the goldfish. We one of the things that we need to try to do here is good or bad, whatever happened the previous week, you try to kind of zone that out and try to look at what you have ahead of you and just look at the facts that you have in front of you. And yes, Joshua Kelly kind of burned us a little bit last week. I don't see that necessarily again. Much better matchup this week, a little bit more expensive, but I think here again to get an RB1 that's going to get the majority of the touches in a game with a extremely high total, I just think we got to go with that 5,400 with Josh Kelly, and I don't think we need to go down. I see the argument on both sides with the Colts running game and the Baltimore running game, but I just feel like, man, I get a feeling that could be like a 6-3 game if the wins end up being what they are, and starting a backup quarterback for Indy and not being able to throw it. I don't know what the weather has in store. I don't know what they're calling for, but I know it's going to be bad. So I don't think we're going to have to go that deep. But I feel like if we do and we get to that point, we have some options that I could live with. Like you mentioned, Ford and RB1 at 4,800. There's, I'm ever going to get that again. So I think I'm going to go. I like Kelly, and either I think we could pay up for Etienne or. Who was the other one? 6,200. I forgot already. Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Jahmyr Gibbs and Kelly are my two.
Yep, I think that's fine. Per Kevin Roth with Roto Grinders here for that weather. Wind sustained 10 miles per hour, gusts over 20, scattered showers, especially pregame, with some winds potentially clearing late in that Indy Baltimore game. So should be okay, all things considered. So
yeah, not terrible. Definitely not what I had heard at least earlier in the week. So that's a little bit better, but still. The plays are there if we need to pay down, but I don't think we're going to have to.
Yep, I think so as well. Let's go to wide receiver here. Honestly, these top guys, you're just picking straws between the two of them and like nitpicking little things. Justin Jefferson at 9,300. It's kind of like at this point, like in baseball, if you're going to play Ronald Acuna or Matt Olson in your DFS lineups, I'm not going to complain with you. I get why. Like that's kind of where we're at with Justin Jefferson. So I don't really think we need to go too deep into the analysis on him. If we go down a little bit, again, we talked about Minnesota Chargers. I do like Keenan Allen. I love Mike Williams this week. I'm fine with CeeDee Lamb against Arizona. I didn't like Calvin Ridley as much until Derek Stingley went on IR. Now that outside is very vulnerable for Jacksonville to attack. And then you get down in this mid-range. Outside of Mike Williams and Amari Cooper, this kind of tier of guys right here, I'm not really touching. So wide receiver, what are you kind of looking at? Like, it seems like with the way we're building and kind of talking about it, we may have a very reasonable chance at getting Justin Jefferson in there. But what do you think here amongst this like top tier of wide receivers, let's say $6,000 and above?
I mean, I don't need to make a case for Jefferson, and I'd love to be able to put him in at $9,300. Is awful steep though. And Tyreek Hill, of course, Jalen Waddle was ruled officially out earlier I think Tyreek Hill becomes even more valuable there against Denver, although that's going to be tough against Patrick Surtain. But here again, I think that Tyreek Hill is just one of those freak shows that it doesn't matter who's on him, he's going to get his numbers. Scrolling down a little bit, you mentioned Calvin Ridley. I like that a lot too. I saw that Stingley was out as well. The guys that I focused on in my lineup, though, because I went a little bit more expensive later on, I looked at the other side of that Vikings pass attack, and I looked at Jordan Addison on the other side. I know that $9,300 and Jordan Addison has looked solid so far. A little bit inconsistent as a rookie, but I feel like there's going to be enough on the bone here for him to get some. And then I mentioned Amari Cooper earlier, and then guy that I was kind of on the fence about, but I went ahead and went with him anyway, was Drake London being the RB1 there. I don't love Desmond Ridder, but here again, I kind of feel like that there's going to be some points scored in that game. I feel like Atlanta can put a few points up against Detroit. It's going to be a little tougher on the road, but I especially like Jordan Addison and Amari Cooper there, and maybe we can do something different with that wide receiver 3.
Here on DraftKings too, when you get down Elijah Moore, if you don't go with Amari Cooper, I think you can go for him at 4,700. I talked about it on the Prop It Like a Top podcast. Houston can't run the ball at all. That's just how it is right now, unfortunately. They have to throw it. I think everybody's going to zig to Nico Collins. He has the tougher matchup in terms of the cornerback matchup. So for me, I think we could save a lot of money for 3,600 and go with Tank Dell. He'll have the best matchup on the field working out of the slot. He'll move around and everything, but he finally had his coming out party last week with Noah Brown going to IR. So if we start paying for a bunch of guys, I think a $3,600 Tank Dell gives us a lot of flexibility. If we come down a little bit more, I do love Zay Flowers. If the weather's not going to be as bad as they say, he's a value at 5,400. And then if we come down a little bit more, so for us, we're doing cash games. This isn't going to be a lineup that I go with, but if you are making multiple lineups, you need to have some KJ Osborne exposure just because he gets enough slot run, and that's going to be the vulnerable matchup against the Chargers. So for us with cash games, when we're entering in double ups, we probably won't get to a KJ Osborne type. But if you're entering multiple lineups, that's something that I would consider looking at. We go to tight end Ron here. Travis Kelce, the top dog, no surprise. TJ Hawkinson there, Mark Andrews, Evan Engram. Cole Kmet as the 5th highest priced tight end, which is very interesting considering he's yet to top 10 fantasy points in a game. So interesting that he's all the way up there. David Njoku, Sam Laporta, Kyle Pitts in a great matchup against Detroit. What did your lineup end up shaking out here at the tight end position?
I ended up going Travis Kelce just because even some of these matchups that are in green, I don't love them. Like Hunter Henry sitting there in green against the Jets. And then you go a little bit further down. Kyle Pitts was intriguing because I feel like if you wanted to be contrarian, I feel like he's kind of a contrarian play because I don't think a lot of people are going to go with him because the usage just has not been there. And we continue to wait for it to happen. And I think that Arthur Smith is smart enough to know that. I just don't know why that they don't try to work him in more. Maybe this is the week. I don't know. Maybe it's against Detroit, but I didn't mind that at 3,900. But I ended up just going Travis Kelce, set it and forget it. I cheaped out a little bit at wide receiver, but I felt like my running backs were solid enough. I got that Kirk Cousins exposure. I think I put James Cook in my flex, so I felt pretty good about going with him there. But I don't know, do we want to try to reach for him? Do we want to try to reach for Jefferson? I don't know.
Well, I think it's something if you put a Tank Dell in there, a Kelce and Jefferson bill isn't exactly far off. On the main slate here, the 3 teams that have allowed the most fantasy points per game, the tight ends, we have the Miami Dolphins defense against Denver, but there's no tight end that I trust there. Detroit against Atlanta, so that's a bump to Kyle Pitts. And then actually allowing the 6th most fantasy points overall to tight ends this year is the Jaguars defense. So is this Dalton Schultz's coming out party? I can tell you that about 17 of my fantasy leagues sure freaking hope so, because that's the weak spot in many of my lineups right now, including the Kings Classic League that you've probably heard Bob Lung talk about in association with the Fantasy Football Expo. So that's something to consider at tight end. And then we won't talk about defense till we set our lineup, Ron. But ultimately, I mean, Cowboys are far and above everybody else. I don't fault you for going there. Jaguars, I don't fault you for going there. Maybe Ravens, Colts, and the potential weather that's going to be there. But we'll just kind of see what money we have left and figure out defense from there. That's the way to go about it. So let's go ahead and build a lineup here with the last couple of minutes we have. So let's go quarterback here. We go with Kirk Cousins.
Yep.
Okay.
For sure.
Running back. So I do like Tony Pollard, but I'm almost pretty set with doing like a Travis Etienne, Jahmyr Gibbs, or Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, or hold out on Etienne, see if we have the money and do Joshua Kelly with one of those 3 guys. What do you think?
Let's go Kelly and Gibbs, and then let's see maybe we can fit one of those other guys at our flex.
Wide receiver. We're going to have to get a receiver with Cousins. I mean, I think we may have enough money to do it. Do you want to try Jefferson from now and then switch to Addison if we have to?
Yep.
All right, let's go Jefferson. Then we're going to have to do the money. I'll put my neck out there for Tank Dell. Then come back to wide receiver. We're going to have to get in a little bit here. Do you want to go with Amari Cooper? We talked about him.
Yeah. Because I don't think we're going to have to go all the way down to Elijah Moore.
Yep. Let's put Moore in there. Tight end. I think the Kelsey dreams might be done. Yeah, it's going to be close. Defense here. Any particular defense that you really want to go with? I think Seattle going up against not Bryce Young might be the way to go against Carolina.
I paid down a little bit for Buffalo at 2,900. They looked a little better last week, and I'm still not fully convinced that Sam Howell is the guy. I know that Washington's running game has looked solid, but I just feel like Buffalo, and that could be a game affected. I don't know if that's going to be affected a little bit any by weather or not. They might be a little further south of that, but like I said, they kind of came to life a little bit last week, and I feel like at $2,900, that's probably the best matchup of any of them below 3,000.
Yep, I'm fine with that here. So then flex, we don't really have enough for anybody. So we're going to have to move off of Jefferson or Kelsey. It's just a matter of which one you want to move off of.
If we move off of Jefferson, does that mean we go Addison then?
Yeah, I want some part of that Minnesota passing attack.
Let's do that and see what that shakes out.
Flex is 6,200, so that's going to put us in Kenneth Walker range.
Beautiful.
And then, so let's see. So that's 6,200 at flex. I mean, we liked him. I'd love to get to ETN, but
how far off are we from ETN? 700?
About 700.
I was going to say, I don't know that there's a defense below Buffalo that I really feel great about.
15.
I mean, the Jets again against New England, I looked at. Other than that, there's nothing I really feel all that great about.
Yeah, I don't want to go because that gives us Cousins and Addison together with Kelly on the other side. We get a one-off Jahmyr Gibbs, who, if there's going to be a week that he gets more usage, you'd think it'd have to be this week. We get Amari Cooper against one of the worst secondaries in football. Travis Kelce, who's elite receiving option. Kenneth Walker against a very favorable Carolina defense. Tank Dell, who should have the best matchup in the Houston passing attack. And then the Bills defense against Sam Howell and company. Like, I think that I would love to get ETN in here, but it's a matter of like, if we go up from Gibbs, then we have to cut 300 somewhere. And this has most of the guys that I think I like a good bit. So it could be one of those things. If you have some money, if you're doing multiple builds, drop down from the Bills, save a couple $100, move Gibbs up to Kenneth or to Travis Etienne, get him against Houston. I think you could certainly do that. But otherwise, I'm good with this lineup if you are.
Everything you said, I think if we make that move and take Gibbs out and try to play around with that, I think we're going to have less guys that we like. I feel pretty good about everything from the top down here, and I think this gets the most of the guys that you and I both like. And I think, like you said, with Tank Dell and with Addison, it gets us a piece of all these games that we want to get and a little bit of a discounted price as well, instead of going with top tier guys across the board.
Yep, I would say that. So that'll be the week 3 consistently Cashin lineup. Kirk Cousins, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Kelly, Jordan Addison, Tank Dell, Amari Cooper, Travis Kelce, Kenneth Walker III, and the Bills defense. Let me bring it back here to just Ron and I. So, Ron, as we go ahead and put a bow on this episode, let everyone know where they can find you and everything you got coming out here at BigGuyFantasySports.com.
Yeah, man. Of course, you guys got the Prop It Like It's Hot that came out a little bit earlier today, and you guys have been killing it the last couple of weeks. So, hats off to you guys for doing that. And check out the rest of our friends over at BigGuyFantasySports.com. Got something new coming out about every day. Check out the new consistency show that Bob and I put out last week. Talk a little bit about, you might hear a couple of the guys that we talked about mentioned on there as well. Kind of wrapping up last week, giving you a preview of this week, and on the at Ron Rigney. Not hard to find.
There you go. And I'm at Colby Conway, helping out with some content over at BigGuyFantasySports.com. And yes, if you are into the player props and such, after a 4-2 week 1, Bob and I went 5-1 last week. So we're 9-3 here through 2 weeks, hoping for a big week 3 as well to keep things going. And hopefully Ron and I, we get back on the clutch game here for the DFS lineups here. So make sure you give Ron a follow on X at Ron Rigney. I'm at Colby R. Conway. And we will see you next week with the next edition of the Consistently Cashin podcast.